And the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has vowed to take on European judges after the European Court of Human Rights intervened in the Shamima Begum case. While Strasbourg has asked the UK to justify stripping Begum of her citizenship, raising the prospect of a return appeal. Well, ministers say the decision was upheld by British courts and will be robustly defended. But the move has, of course, reignited calls for the UK to quit the ECHR. Stuart, this is a saga that started a long, long time ago when Shamima Begum was trafficked, exploited, moved to Syria when she was only 15. But, of course, in recent years, there's been this big row about her citizenship. Do you think Shabana Mahmood will win the battle to keep Shamima Begum outside the country? I think
Shabana's showing some pretty fierce fight on this point, because it's an illustrative point about us being part of the ECHR. The Supreme Court has made the ruling on this, and I believe in our institutions being able to make, an appropriate ruling, and they have done so in this case. However, the purpose of the ECHR is to hold governments and other institutions to account. It's a higher set of laws that we have voluntarily gone into, albeit nearly 70 years ago. So cases like this, as the world has moved on, as things have evolved, are going to test this case law. And I think that's why it's appropriate that at the moment we are looking to seek to reform the ECHR and the interpretation that we have of it, especially with Articles 3 and 8. And this is an illustrative case of why that needs to happen.
Now, Laila, your party, Reform, are committed to leaving the ECHR, as the Conservatives are now. But it's always been the case that other countries have managed to resist ECHR rulings, even when they are part of it. Can't we just say no?
We could. I don't think any foreign court should decide who gets to stay, because it's not even about Shamima Begum anymore. It's about national security, right? And for me, that trumps everything. It's not about compassion for her. She is a risk. She left voluntarily at the age of 15 to join ISIS, which actually wanted to bring complete destruction to our country. They killed British aid workers. She married. She had children. And she might have connections. She might still be a security risk, and she should not set foot in this country again.
But could it be the case that it's true at the same time that she is a security risk, but also that at the age of 15, she was groomed and trafficked, and at that point she was a victim, as many other teenage girls we know are victims of sexual exploitation at that age?
I don't think she was a victim, and to say that she was groomed and trafficked is kind of rewriting history.
But what differentiates her, a 15-year-old girl, who was being groomed for sex by adult men, with the victims of the grooming gangs, age 15, who are being groomed for sex by adult men? Why is she different?
I'll tell you, because they didn't join ISIS.
But some of them thought they were consenting to the abuse, because that's what grooming is, isn't it?
We're not talking about the abuse she suffered there. We're talking about her presenting a national security risk to this country.
Now, yes, that's true.
So you're talking about her rights, right? But for me, her single right doesn't trump the right of every innocent person here to live without fear of an attack. We already have loads of people that have been let into this country by the Conservatives and Labour who hate this country. We don't need another one.
But, Stuart, do you not think that two things can be true at the same time? She can be a security risk, and perhaps we're right not to let her back in.
I think this is where we need to have a real a worldview and concurrent reasoning on issues such as this. We've seen it with Abdel Fattah this week. And I think this is where we need to really zoom out and not get completely drawn in on one element. There already has been, as part of those court cases, an assessment of a risk to national security. There is a principle about, Laila, what you're saying about these people and their values. Are they a threat to our way of life and our security?
It's not about her values. It's not about her values. She joined ISIS. I'm not discussing her values. She joined ISIS. We know very well what ISIS's values are. It's the destruction of Britain. They've already killed Britain. They want mass destruction. She went and joined them willingly. She crossed countries. She did it willingly.
This interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN and their New Year deal. New Year, new VPN, and a huge saving of up to 80% if you act now. You're busy planning how to get in shape, but the hackers are planning how to get into your accounts. ExpressVPN locks down your connection so you can start the year protecting your data. This offer ends on the 7th of January, so scan the QR code or click the link in the description now.
And she stayed there for years, and now she's claiming citizenship isn't an automatic right. Once you commit a treacherous act like joining ISIS, you forfeit that right to be British. And I think that should apply to any British person.
But the reason I want to draw parallels with the grooming gangs is because the substantive point that the European courts are ruling on is that the British government did not properly consider how she was groomed before she left. And I do think this is worth exploring, because you said she went willingly, and that's certainly true. But some of the grooming gang victims went willingly with those men to start with. That's what grooming is. And do we not recognise in law that for 15-year-old girls can't see those consequences? That's why they need protection.
Do you not think we need to separate it, though, somewhat? That we can look at those concurrent things, that at 15 there's a very reasonable chance, and we would consider people of that age, children, to have been influenced and groomed, whatever it may be, for whatever cause or whatever it is. So that can be concurrently true, and they can also be concurrently reassessed on their threat to security. I don't think anything is ever necessarily inherently true permanently, and that assessment does need to take place. The question here is the legal point about the ECHR having the ability to change a UK court's ruling based upon citizenship, and that is what is coming under review.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying, Stuart. Both things are true at once. She's clearly a security risk and shouldn't be let back in, but I do think we should be investigating what did happen to her when she was 15.
No, I don't think it's not our problem, right? We don't owe her a second chance. The government solely owes the British people protection. For me, that's it. And the fact that the ECHR has the audacity to overrule a Supreme Court ruling will be a massive precedent. If they say we cannot strip her of her citizenship, it opens the floodgates to loads of other ISIS brides, ISIS people who've somehow repented now that they've lost the battle and want to come back.
Only if the precedent is set that court can then start doing that. And that's the point about the interpretation of these rules, that nations that have signed up to it have actually signed up to agree to. We've agreed to be part of that layer of judiciary. And that's
why we have to leave it.
But the purpose
you make
of the
argument
ECHR...
for me.
Oh, no, but the purpose of the ECHR is to protect people's rights if a state, for whatever reason, perhaps there's a rogue interpretation of even their own state law...
So unelected judges, you want unelected judges in Strasbourg. What you're saying is that ECHR's role is to supersede unelected judges in this country, British law, about who can stay and whether we can allow an ISIS
all judges are unelected, that's part of the legislature.
But they are British and they are enforcing British law. You want judges in Strasbourg to overrule our judicial system, which is one of the eldest and the best in the world, and decide who comes in. You see, the ECHR was never meant to protect terrorists. So it was never meant to protect illegal migrants from being deported.
I have faith in our institutions, especially our legislative institutions.
Well, you don't, because you're saying the ECHR...
Let's do it.
I have faith in them to be able to make the correct decision. I think the Supreme Court came to the correct decision. I think the consideration here is, which is the mechanism of the ECHR and the interpretation, is illustrative of what it is there to do. It's simply doing its job, and we can have the debate about it, whether we agree or disagree, but at the moment it's simply doing its job, and we have signed up to it. But by being a signature to protect people's rights so that states cannot take away people's rights unnecessarily and illegitimately.
But why should a foreign court do that? Then you don't trust the government at play here. Why should a foreign court decide what rights are legitimate in this country and what rights are not? Then you don't have faith in the British judicial system or in Parliament. You want to. That's not sovereignty. We are either sovereign or we're not, right? We either decide who we let in or we don't.
I think, actually, to the contrary, you could actually argue that we have faith in our legal system to the extent where we believe it can stand up to international scrutiny. And both things can, again, concurrently be the case.
Well, let's talk about that, the political implications, because if Shamima Begum, as you hope and expect, does manage to stand up against this ruling, then do you think that will actually be beneficial to the Labour argument that we can reform rather than leave the ECHR?
So, look, I think that the first port of call is always to look at reform and renegotiation on existing institutions and legislature. To simply leave without attempting that isn't a sensible thing to do. There are many things where I think the ECHR can frustrate the legal process, and lots of different countries that are signatories to it. However, I think that should be the first port of call. And the law is made up of interpretation and case law. In this country, common law is often made up of precedent, and that's simply what's happening here. Now, said very clearly in the past, I think there is definitely need for reform, especially in the immediate term of the ECHR. However, there are benefits to it as well, because we do have transfer agreements, return agreements with countries who are signatories.
I have to pull you up on that, because barely any people are returned under that return agreement, and they never were. What is the exact benefit that the ECHR brings to this country?
Well, I think in terms of returns, for example, being part of a unilateral agreement, that then enables us to ensure that we tick the legal boxes so that we can return people legitimately to safe areas.
The ECHR doesn't allow that.
Without them being able to argue that their rights are under threat through that return. The ECHR doesn't say that.
What unilateral agreement do we have?
Just by being part of the ECHR.
What unilateral agreement have we reached because of the ECHR?
But
Tell me
order
one.
to return
Tell me
people,
one.
we need to tick
Well, we've been
off.
part of it for 70 years. Which one?
Yeah, and other countries have
Which
return agreements.
ones do we have? We don't have any. Your one in, one out is a farce. So actually, we don't really have any returns agreement. There is not one benefit to this country, to British people, about being in the ECHR.
Well,
the only thing
in general, I agree with you that we should leave it, but I think there is actually one particular argument at the moment that could be rectified, which is that some of our free speech judgments, and indeed the Mayor Forstarter judgment, where she was allowed to have a gender-critical belief was legitimate, was actually won under the ECHR. So if we were to leave, and I, personally do support that, we would also need to rewrite some of our own domestic legislation to make sure that those particular protections remain.
That's because the Conservatives brought in stupid equalities law, right? And the gender-critical argument flourished under the Conservatives.
I also don't like the equality, but that's not actually
Laila,
the case.
Many years ago, we had the question about whether to
It was
leave
the
the
Labour that
European
brought in the
Union.
Equalities Act.
Okay.
Anyway.
But we had the question whether to leave the European Union, and I was very dissatisfied with the renegotiation that took place, and it influenced my decision because I didn't think the renegotiation was taken seriously. So, whereas if we look at this now with the ECHR, I don't want to decide to leave something without knowing what's going to replace it.
But why do you need it replaced? What benefit is it giving this country?
Because it gives overview to citizens of this country that if they have a fundamental disagreement with their legislature, that they have signed up to a higher degree of scrutiny, which gives them means and access in order to have a different
When
hearing.
has this happened? So this completely undermines democracy.
Well,
you are
what
saying
Miriam has just
you are
said here as
saying
well.
because that's because the laws of this because we had a government that wrote laws that didn't make sense.
But you've answered your own
No,
question.
but we're going to hang on. We're going to have
You either believe in democracy. Sorry.
No, I'm
you don't.
sorry. We're going to have to tie this up, but I think there's so much to unpick here, and I think part of the problem is that because the ECHR has been embedded in our domestic legislation for 25 years now, an awful lot would need unpicking if we were to leave the ECHR. But let's leave it there, and we've got to read the statement from the Home Office spokesperson who said the government will always protect the UK and its citizens. That's why Shamima Begum, who posed a national security threat, had her British citizenship revoked and is unable to return to the UK. We will robustly defend any decision made to protect our national security. Well,